Hello and welcome, everyone. Yes, it is me, Phil, the unusual host, the step in, the fill in for our illustrious usual host, Liam, who is currently still sat on a tarmac in Heathrow, I imagine, as he recently updated us, waiting to go on his honeymoon in Mauritius. So you've got me and Mick tonight. We've got a friend of ours, Andy, joining us a little bit later on. But for now, me and Mick are going to fumble through the literal fumble that was an Eagles Patriots game. So Mick, how are you doing, man? I mean, we've literally only just saw each other yesterday and spent the weekend together at the wedding in absolute scorching heat. I'm surprised you didn't melt halfway through, but how are you feeling now after that weekend of booze, cigars, whiskey, and red zone?
Oh, mate, it was a fantastic weekend. I can't lie. I thought you would probably be sick of my face by now, right enough, and you didn't want to do the pod this week. Having spent too much time with in my company, but it was a good laugh, wasn't it? And it was a great occasion. Like you said, the weather just was not prepared for the weather. It was just a puddle after it. Like during the ceremony, it was like 30-degree heat, 31, 32-degree heat, just beating down on my face. You know, I'm in full kilt, 100% wool, big jacket, the vest, the tie, the works, and I definitely probably shed a couple of pounds just in sweat alone. Alone.
Yeah, losing your fluids quite rapidly for the person expected to be least able to deal with that kind of heat. You were certainly wrapped up in several layers of wool, like you said. I mean, you didn't take your jacket off all day until close to the end, and I think you're making everyone else feel a bit feeble for being stripping down as quickly as possible. I think Liam was down to the bare minimum even before the dinner, so that was a useful sign. I think is that like the usual sort of rule at weddings? Is like, you know, once the groom takes his tie off, all the men can take the tie off and strip down to one or two buttons, or someone said the mother of the bride takes her out or something.
With the hat. Yeah, that's the traditional one, but it seems to come down to a bit more.
It was the literal sigh of relief across absolutely everyone. As soon as Liam took his tie off, we could just hear this massive eternal rustle throughout the crowd as everyone just went, "Oh my god, I can take my tie off now." I know I for one was I'm not great in hot weather. I do find my shirts go see-through pretty quickly, which was evident by us sitting at the very back. And then when we had to turn around to welcome Katie in down the aisle, everyone started giggling behind me, and I knew exactly what was going on. They could probably see the exact curvature of my shoulder blades as the shirt was no longer protecting me at all. But there's some good moments. I mean, it didn't stop us from watching the game, obviously. Well, in a way, we watched as best as we could on my phone. We sort of, as soon as the main festivities are out of the way, I think we shuttled away to the seating that was a bit remote in the middle of the darkness near the trees. Had a cigar with Katie's uncle Tony, who we've had on the pod before, and it was nice to finally meet him in person. Brought out a bag of cigars, kept the drinks flowing. We're all huddled around my phone watching the game until I ran out of data. I then had to quickly roll back some data. We had to use your phone for a hotspot before eventually retiring to the bar once it got late enough to try and catch on red zone, which was frustrating in itself because obviously you're not just we were the tense way of the end of the game, as we'll get to in a minute. Every time they switched to, I don't know, the Dolphins Chargers, everyone was screaming at the TV because everyone's an Eagles fan and everyone's getting upset because they can't see the last. I mean, yeah, the only other story was the whiskey and the Coke situation, which I know stand by Tony B, Loch Lomond Whiskies for this story. I think it'll make you shudder as well. Ordered a nice round of 12-year-old whiskey, single malt whiskey at the bar. Won't use the name, but it was a very nice bottle of whiskey, and the waitress proceeded to pour some Coke in it, much to, she had the glasses behind the bar and she poured the single malts, and you and I carried on chatting before. She sort of like, that's taken a while for her to just put, a cube of ice in a glass. And then she had the gun in her hand and she brings these 3 glasses up, now filled with Coke. And just the sheer horror that came over both of our faces as we just looked at each other. And it's that typical British thing where your first thought is like, do we complain? And I was looking at you thinking Mick's going to absolutely tear her face off, because, I mean, this is whiskey. This is like his national drink. This is, you can't do that. You can't put Coke in. I mean, you can put Coke with whiskey, but not this quality level. You looked at me, I looked at you, and eventually I just sheepishly sort of said, sorry, I asked for singles. And she went, oh, okay. And she just made some new ones. But the sheer horror is the moment of panic between the two of us of ruining 3. I mean, they weren't cheap. I think it was like 20 quid for 3 singles, eventually with some Coke as well. But she must have crafted that one away.
You can see my state of mind at the time, Phil. I just wanted a drink in me. So you looked at me and I thought, you know what? I'll drink it. I'll drink anything at this point. I'm too warm. Just give me a cold drink, even if it's got Coca-Cola in it. But single malt whiskey with Coca-Cola, absolutely terrible. Sack the waitress.
That really surprised me, because I
just didn't have it in me. I didn't have it in me.
When you said, I just drink, I was like, surprisingly, that I was the more principled of the two of us when it came to whiskey.
I don't have principles.
Well, that's enough of that. Liam's off, like I said, up in his hollybobs with Katie for their 2-week honeymoon. So it's going to be, congratulations to that, obviously, to the pair of them. And it's going to be you and me for a couple of weeks now, I think, 2 or 3, maybe even 4 weeks. I can't even remember which game Liam's back for before he then shoots off again to be in Washington for the second Commanders game in late October. So hopefully I'm not going to do too bad a job. Mick, you might have to take over next week. But shall we get into the Pats game that we can just about remember?
Yes, let's do it.
Right. So 25-20. Definitely closer than a lot of the predictions that you, I, and everyone else who took part in our score predictions game had. I think we were all in the high 30s with not conceding more than 20 points. And it was definitely a struggle of a game, despite, after 10 minutes of the first quarter, I think it became an incredible struggle. But obviously we took the 3-point field goal lead before Darius Slay and his pick 6 takes it in, puts us up 10-0, and then we get a fumble recovery, which Devontae Smith takes in for catches in the end zone for a touchdown off a pretty good throw. So after going 16-0 up, the Pats then had a couple of good drives, very quick drives, annoyingly smooth drives that sort of brought them back to 14-16. And then halftime came, and I think that's where it started to get a bit tense, because it felt very much from that point, from my perspective, that we were just keeping them at arm's length with field goals. And then we shoot ourselves in the foot on a 4th and 2, going for it with a hopeless pass play, because we'll get into that in a minute as well. But that's the general overview of how the game went. But how did you feel about that, Mick? Like, what's your main takeaway from the game before we get into the specifics of the good, the bad, and the damn right sexy, which is back?
It's back, baby. I was so excited actually about doing the good, the bad, and the damn right sexy until I realised how much was going to go into the bad column on the very first week of the NFL season that we've been so eagerly waiting on all these months in the off season. But I've tried to just calm down, just take a moment, step away from it, being like, look, we got the win. We're 1-0. We're not the Chiefs who, they lost. The Bengals lost. The Bills lost, as we know now, sitting recording on Tuesday night, and we come out with the dub, and that's really all that matters, as long as we improve and understand what went wrong. And we're going to go through what exactly went wrong in that game, because there was quite a fair bit. But like you said, Phil, it was hard to get a good feel for the game, since we were in the middle of a dark field looking at a 10-inch phone screen with cigars. But as the game went on, like you said, it looked like we were we were just rolling in the first quarter, at least. Like you said, Slay had the pick six, and we were literally sitting with cigars, cigars and whiskey, just enjoying the moment. And then before we know it, that second quarter, I think, is where it just all fell down. Watching the game back, the offense just couldn't get anything clicking. Start off with Jalen Hurts. I didn't think Jalen Hurts had a particular great game. It's fair to say he was 22 of 33 attempts, 170 yards, 1 touchdown, a passer rating of 89.2.
It's a very vanilla stats. They're not terrible, but they're definitely not going to. I mean, there's no interceptions. Obviously, had the fumble, but a QBR, passer rate of 89.2 isn't going to sort of shock people, but it's not going to excite people either, is it?
No, and it's like it's just because of all the hype and build up of the offseason, Jalen getting paid, how good he was last season, how good he was in the last game that we watched that he played in February, albeit, and what we saw on the field didn't really match up to our lofty expectations, because we are saying on the last few podcasts we expect the Eagles to go back to the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship game, like at least like the number one seed, or win the division. The winning the division being probably the lowest expectation that we have on this team, and to do that we have to collect the wins. And so the expectation is so high. We expect Jalen to come and ball out, do what he did in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, but it just didn't turn out that way. And can we put that down to rustiness? Like we didn't see Jalen at all, or any of the rest of the ones during the preseason.
I was going to lead you into that. That was going to be my follow-up question, was that how much do you lay at the feet of Sirianni and the decision to not play him? I mean, for me personally, I don't disagree with the decision. Obviously, this might be the so what of it to show that Jalen Hurts was rusty. But the comparisons between this season and last season is that, we didn't know 100% that Jalen was the guy. So we needed to kind of have a little bit of a test, see what we were going to do this season. The difference is this season, we know exactly who we're getting. We know what we left off at the end of the Super Bowl, one of the best Super Bowl performances ever. And he's not that guy at the moment. So are you putting that down to the fact that he didn't play in any preseason games, or are you just saying that it's the first NFL game, anything can happen, and it was still a dub?
Yeah, there's so many contributing factors of why this game just went the way it did. One of them will be preseason rustiness, because I know Jalen made some poor decisions in the RPO game where he kept he kept the ball and ran where he perhaps should have stood up in the pocket. They maybe rolled out too quick on a couple of plays. Didn't trust his O-line, but I mean the O-line weren't doing him any favors that day. Like, just moving on to that, the protection was genuinely awful for most of that game, and again, it's another part of the team where you're like, it's the strongest unit, not in just in our team, but it's the strongest unit in the NFL. A position group is our offensive line, and it's supposed to, the trenches are supposed to be our trademark at this point. So you don't expect that to be a weak point at any given time, even in the first game of the season. And I know we had breakdowns last year against the Lions in week 1, but new season, there's not been much rotation on the offensive line. Cam Jurgens came in and played right guard. I don't think Jurgens had a particularly bad game, I will say that. I don't think the interior were particularly bad. Most of my questions came from Lane Johnson, which, I mean, just speaking those words just doesn't feel right, because you know how good Lane Johnson is, and he's not let up a sack, and God knows how many pass blocking snaps. But according to PFF, he had a block rating of 56.3 and allowed 6 pressures, including a quarterback hit, and Mailata allowed 4. So the bookends did not have a great day against, Judon is a good pass rusher. Let's not get it too twisted that the Patriots do have a very good defense, and they showed up. They gave the Eagles problems. So that was another contributing factor for me, that Hurts couldn't trust his O-line, and he wasn't afforded the time behind there to stand up in the pocket and let the deep routes progress.
Yeah, so like I'd agree. I mean, it did feel very much like Hurts was having to scramble a bit too much. Like you said, it felt almost like Jalen of 18 months ago, when he was sort of scrambling. They wanted to create more of a passer of him at the start of last season, and that's what they eliminated, was just the need. But whether that obviously came directly from the offensive line or his own rustiness that he was making that decision, that's his safety net. And so he's just clutching on that. And at the end of the day, the conditions were also quite poor as well. So it wasn't an easy game to sort of kick off with the big ceremony around the Pats inducting Tom Brady into their own Ring of Honor, Hall of Fame, whatever it was. It doesn't matter, they lost. But it did throw... I mean, there were plenty of people out there, especially on the Pats side, that were saying that this ain't going to be the walk in the park that you think it's going to be. And I think we were all sat there going, nah, you've got nothing. You've got Stevenson. But Mac Jones wasn't terrible. Mac Jones was getting the ball out. He was doing what he needed to do, and he had a couple of nice drives. I think if the roles had been reversed, we would have been kind of going, Hurts had a solid game, throwing like streaming up the park. And I think whether that was on us or whether they just played better than we expected them to, you just don't know. But the other part of the bad, so let's get the bad out of the way, because I think that's what everyone loves, is that when we finish on all the good, we get them geared up for Thursday night. The coaching is obviously under the spotlight, given the fact that both coordinators have been replaced. We're all excited about Brian Johnson coming in, given his history with Hurts. But it's a massive step up for him in the offensive side of the game overall, not just worrying about Jalen Hurts and what he's going to do. It's the offense as a whole. So the scheming, I think it felt a little bit immature, maybe. A little bit oversimple, but that will come with experience, and that's not. No one's looking to sort of overreact and start building the Brian Johnson train that we built for Gannon that took him out of town eventually. We're all just sort of wanting to understand a few of the decisions. I think, from my perspective, is first off the overuse of Gainwell. No, again, not something that you can kind of look at and go, why were they using Gainwell so much? Gainwell is a good running back. Gainwell, they kept saying that Gainwell's probably going to be the lead back. Some sources were saying, causing us to kind of go, well, you've just got Swift. What are you on about? But obviously they've got a plan, and the plan this week was to run Gainwell. Now, I can't think of a reason why, and that's all I ever try to do with this sort of situation. I try to put my head in their shoulders, think about what the intention was, whether it came off or not. Because sometimes good plans just don't come off. They look terrible, but the intent was there. And for me, I just can't figure out what the logic was behind the running game. Swift got one carry for 3 yards, and then Boston Scott got a carry, and I think that was it, wasn't it? Apart from Hurts running on the ground himself, Boston Scott and DeAndre Swift both got one attempt for 3 yards each. Now, I'm not sure if that's correct, because that seems awfully symmetrical, but that's the stat lines off the game book. So, but looking at that, Nick, what's your thoughts behind just the excessive use? 14 attempts to 2 of anyone else of actual running back side of things.
It's fairly lopsided, and it's sort of the same thing happened last year when we thought, running back by committee is a possibility. That's all we heard during pre-season sort of thing, and then it came to it, and Miles Sanders was the workhorse, and that was it. The same things happened again, but this time is slightly more daunting, because last year we said running back by committee, but we knew what we knew what we had in Miles Sanders, and he's a bit better than Kenny Gainwell. And behind him, there wasn't a lot behind him, but making moves in the offseason, like bringing Penny in. I know we're not paying him a lot of money, but he was inactive on game day. We trade for Swift, so I mean, we're using assets there to bring a guy in to run the ball for us, or even become a target on checkdowns and things. But again, he didn't see I think his snap count was decent, or around the same level of Kenny Gainwell. I don't have the snap count in front of me right now, but I'm sure it was close-ish. But the touches that Kenny Gainwell got was just unbelievable. Like, from the little I actually seen of the game last on the night itself, I remember turning to you and said, "Why are they using Gainwell so much?" It just seemed to be snap after snap. It was just Gainwell running the ball. I think he even had quite a few targets, and at the time, I think it was more than some of our wide receivers, like AJ. And it's like, why are we not getting the passing game involved? And it just seemed to be so one-dimensional. And I think that's why we had so much success in the first quarter, and then totally stuttered on offense for pretty much the rest of the game, is because the Patriots, cottoned on and changed their game plan. Bill Belichick's one of the best defensive minds that there are, and we didn't have a counter. We just had one game plan, one set, like maybe keep it simple, stupid, probably just for the first game to keep the guys, to one aim, one goal, just get this game over with and move on, sort of thing. But it didn't work, and it was working, but then it just stopped working, and we didn't have an answer for it. And it wasn't until we got into half time I felt there was maybe a bit of a resurgence when we came out in the third quarter, or towards the end of the third quarter, when we did start to get in a bit of a rhythm with the wide receivers. But I can't for the life of me understand why that was the game plan going in. And Nick Sirianni's going to just have to take that on the chin. And I think he understands that as well. He was asked about it post-game, why wasn't Swift used? And he sort of, said the same thing about Devontae Smith not getting any catches against the Lions, or was that the Goddard thing? Maybe I'm getting confused with the Goddard thing. But at the end of the day, it was game plan and it didn't work.
Yeah, well, like you said, with AJ Brown, sort of they got the rhythm going. I think he had sort of 3 or 4 targets on the bounce, and they made some considerable yardage. There was one that I think got turned down because they said it wasn't a catch, which I think was a terrible call. So there's every chance that the way the officials have, looked at the game and taken that one off the board was sort of a drive killer, because those sort of decisions, a big gain chalked off always just deflates you and sort of stunts the momentum of a drive. I think, the whole situation with the running backs, you can't even say that Swift's more of a receiving running back, so maybe there wasn't the game for sort of passing it to the backs, because Gainwell got four targets, 4 catches. Swift got 2, I think it was, and it just doesn't make sense to me. And that's
Swift.
And he had a drop,
quite a bad drop.
And I think that what worries me most going into Thursday, because it's such a short week, there's very little time to analyze, reflect, and change anything. You're almost just hoping that you can put a few band-aids on, because if we get through the Vikings game, we've got a long week then, obviously, and very long week. We've got sort of a mini bye up until the following Monday. So we're almost looking at 2 weeks off to sort things out. So it's going to be hugely important that we manage to get through Thursday night with a good win. And I'm not saying that it sounds really defeatist, that we're sort of totally going to, maybe we can limp through the Vikings. I'm still confident that we can beat the Vikings, and we'll get into it about exactly why, because they're different teams. The Vikings are off to a bad start, and they're a different team in terms of their pass defense isn't definitely not as good. Their defense as a whole is not as good, as was demonstrated by the result against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But there's not a lot of time to just investigate and just try and figure out what's going on. And just to touch on a few of the other sort of in the bad column before we try and get back onto the good. Reed Blankenship did have a good game in the secondary. I think he had 6 tackles, I think it was, and I think he had a couple of good drives. Sidney Brown got some good action on special teams, but didn't seem to get any use on actual defense. And Justin Evans' pitch, as you've quite rightly written on the notes. The overall view of the secondary, it did feel very much a little bit disorganized, a little bit scattergun. There's a couple of boldies, breakdowns that I've had a look at, and it's very much like uncovered players going through. Put that down to inexperience in the team, because we've obviously lost a couple of linebackers in the offseason, the ones we replaced it with. We'll touch on injuries in a minute. Nakobe Dean's obviously gone down. What's your overall thoughts on the secondary? Are you worried, or are you just thinking, again, that's a bit of rust and a bit of inexperience that will gradually sort of get ironed out as the season goes along?
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm about to say I'm on the fence, but that's your tagline. But I think there's players there that are clearly inadequate for this roster, and Justin Evans is one of them. I didn't think he had a particularly good game. I think, like I said, I wrote in the pod notes for everyone listening that Justin Evans is pish, as Phil also said, which I wholeheartedly believe. I don't know. I don't understand why the Eagles like him so much. Terrell Edmonds has far much more experience. Maybe might not be a better player, but he has far more experience. Like Evans just looked totally lost out there. Like he doesn't even understand the defensive scheme, and so many zone plays he was in the wrong area, or he was covering the wrong man. He just didn't look like an NFL player. He just looked like a lost little boy. And I need to see a hell of a lot more out of him if he's going to be a starter for this team on the run that we're looking for. Because that's just a chink in the armor for this defense, and we can't allow that. I mean, we're talking about the Patriots here. You know, they have probably one of the worst receiving units in the NFL. I'm not sure I could name all the three of the starting wide receivers, but I just was not impressed at all. And the linebacker position as well. Again, Zach Cunningham, I know he won the starting job next to Nakobe Dean during the preseason, but I mean, there wasn't stiff competition, really, was there? It was either it was between Miles Jack, who decided, nah, I'm just going to retire, and Nicholas Morrow, who I think we've now signed back to the 53 or possibly the practice squad. Again, just not good enough, and we're getting beat by Mac Jones. Mac Jones was just balling out over us at one point, and it was sickening, to be honest, Phil. And see if we come across a high-powered offense, which we will very soon this season, it's going to get embarrassing. And Kirk Cousins can throw the ball. You know, Vikings aren't short of an arm and some good receivers. In fact, the best receiver in the game, as it happens, as well as a very, very good. So I'm getting too ahead of myself. I'll stop because I'm getting into the Vikings preview. But I'm worried.
Yeah, especially when you've got players like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison who had a good game coming into us. We're going to have to definitely find some heavy-duty Band-Aids. It was Nicholas Morrow's been obviously elevated to the active squad, and Rashaan Evans has been promoted to the practice squad, or been signed to the practice squad, I should say. Okay, I think that's enough bad. The only last thing to quickly touch on was Sipos at standard, which I know is going to anger Mick greatly. Made a bit of an arse of a punt. And flinched and was late to kick it and drew an illegal man downfield. Like, I think that was one I didn't quite catch because I saw it. I didn't realize what was happening, but I think I remember that happening now. I mean, he's obviously going to go back down. There's now a decision that has to be made about his place on the practice squad and whether he's going to get elevated full time.
He's terrible, Phil. He's going to cost us a game. I'm sure of it. He's definitely going to cost us another game this season.
Speaking of cost us a game, I'm pretty sure I saw Derek Barnett's name a couple of times on some key plays, which drew a brief heart palpitation or two from me. So
you can give him his dues. I don't think he got a flag. So
well, he didn't, but then it's like
well done for not fucking up.
Here's your trophy for not screwing the game up. Luckily, someone else did that on your behalf this time. Maybe we'll have time for some Bonehead Cafe talk next week. But let's quickly move on to the good and the downright sexy, because I think we all need a bit of a pickup after that. Now, Mick's highlighted one particular player for the downright sexy, but I might make an argument for one of the others. But we'll get into it gradually, and then we'll talk about it more. Jordan Davis had a pretty good game, along with Jalen Carter. Had a sack towards the end, which was key to stifle in the Patriots as they were marching down the field again, which put them back into fourth down territory, and then they obviously drew a penalty that moved them back even further, which kind of gave us a bit of a sigh of relief. Jalen Carter only played half the defensive snaps and generated the most pressures. and had a big time sack, like I said, at the end of the game. Where are you on the Jalen Carter scale, Mick? Are you on the this is what I expected, so no diggity, this is where I'm happy where we are, or are you excited? Are you optimistic? Are you thinking this was better? I didn't expect him to start so quickly, so I'm absolutely ecstatic at where he started, or somewhere in between?
Mate, I'm through the roof on Jalen Carter. The temperature scale is hotter than that 30-degree sun that was beating down on us in Suffolk or Norfolk or whatever English county we were in. I've ordered my Kelly Green Jalen Carter jersey. That was before the season kicked off, and that's how confident I was with this young man. And every GM in the league that drafted before us is going to be kicking themselves why they didn't take this guy, because he's already showing it. He's already having, like, he's, like you said, he generated the most pressures on it. He had 8 pressures during that game, and that's the most rookie defensive tackles had in 5 years or something like that. I'm sure I listened to it on one of the other NFL podcasts who do a lot more research than I do. And the guy's just, I've put him down as the damn right sexy, right? So that's like, I just want to put that out there. So make sure that that's what I've circled. I know Phil's probably going to argue with me about another player, but I put Jalen Carter down for that because I think it was just such a dominant performance for how little he was actually on the field. And it's just so impressive for a guy who is just into the NFL, had so many question marks over the top of him, and he's producing on the field. And that's exactly what we need to see, and it's beautiful, and it's beautiful timing as well, because Fletcher Cox looks to be carrying some rib injuries as well, so we might even see Jalen Carter's snap count increase over the next couple of games to let Fletcher heal again. But looking at the defensive line as a whole, there's just so much to be excited about on that line, because like you said, Jordan Davis recorded half a sack. He made the 4th fumble to give us the short field for the Devontae Smith touchdown. What we needed to see out of Jordan Davis this season is pass rush ability, and that's what he's shown us already in week 1. He turned up to training camp this season looking a bit more trimmer, a bit more leaner. He looked ready to play some NFL football from what he produced in his first. And I think he had a better game on Sunday than he did any week last season, and that's saying a lot. And not only Jordan Davis, I mean, Fletcher Cox was out there and he was doing his thing. Milton Williams is like a really good underrated player. Is like, we just sort of see him as like just one of the rotational guys, but Milton Williams would be a starter on most other defensive lines across the NFL. And this is a guy we probably have to give a bit more credit to that we don't currently. So I'll be keeping a keen eye on Milton over the next coming weeks. The guys on the edge, Josh Sweat had a hell of a game as well, I think. So kudos to the defensive line, and especially to those Georgia Dogs, because I think they deserve it.
Yeah, I think, the defensive line as a whole is probably the one key shining light overall for us in that game. The defense as a whole sort of got us into the game, got us in that commanding lead. But generally, if without them, that game could have been absolutely terrible. It could have been really awkward. If not for the talent, the huge amount of talent and the performances from Carter and Davis. And like you said, Cox as well, having a hell of a game. Milton Williams sort of showing up. And that's a good sign. That's sort of probably the lightning rod that we'll cling to going forward, is that as long as we can keep those guys healthy and performing, that the rest can gradually fall into line and hopefully go from strength to strength. Now, Mick, rightly so, mentioned that Jalen Carter was the damn right sexy for this week, according to his notes. I don't necessarily disagree with that, and I think my arguments against it are purely because of the impact that he had on the game. And I'm going on this, Mick, Jake Elliott.
Yeah.
I think, but purely from my perspective, from the fact that if he doesn't make those kicks, and a 61-yarder, like this, they're not nothing kicks. 32, 56, 48, and 51. I think it was a 61-yarder on there as well, I'm pretty sure. But either way, being clutch, people go on about kickers and how much do they really matter. But in a game like this, without those kicks, we don't win that game. And he did miss a PAT. So it wasn't like he had a perfect game, but I feel like when it got to the end of the game and we were just eking out 3 points, 3 points, 3 points, that without that, we would have been under so much more pressure. I mean, yeah, we were 5 points ahead, but a touchdown would have ended that. But if we'd been a point ahead, they would have only needed, or two, obviously, they would have only needed a field goal to take it at the end, which then puts even more pressure on the defense. So I think he's my argument for downright sexy, but it doesn't feel like a very sexy pick because a kicker isn't that. So I'm happy to concede, but maybe kickers are people too. But I feel like people are going to go, well, Jake Elliott's just a kicker. But I feel like these are the reasons we won that game. So he would have been my vote, but I'm happy that that Jalen Carter is equally deserving of it because of the symbolism of what it means, the fact that he's come in, he's everything we want to see, and going forward, you know, offenses are going to take note and they're going to be like, we need to watch out for this guy because he is not something to be trifled. Just because he's a rookie does not mean anything.
That's the problem. I mean, if you're going to try and double, like Jalen Carter wasn't being double teamed on some place, so he was only facing up with the guard. He was just doing a chop and he was straight through to Mac Jones. And luckily, Mac was able to get the ball out pretty fast, or the sack numbers would have been a lot higher. And I think that's probably why in my predictions I put the sack count so high, because I thought the defensive line was going to dominate this offensive line for the Patriots. But credit to them, they had it in their game plan. Let's get the ball out quick and often, which they did to their credit. But yeah, just going back to Jake Elliott, got to give him his props. I will, like, but it was either going to be him or Jalen Carter all day, every day. And it's just, like you said, it's the contribution that he makes to the team year in, year out. Like, Jake is just nails all the time. And it's surprising how many, like, I don't think was he in the Pro Bowl last year? Or did he get snubbed last year? Or was it the year before? It seems every year he gets snubbed for these sort of accolades. But Jake is nails normally. Like you said, he missed the PAT. I'd rather he missed a PAT than a field goal, especially the way the game was going. And we didn't make it easy for Jakey, like you said, kicking, you know, from 50 yards, 60 yards sort of thing. We shouldn't really be putting him in those sort of positions. It just goes to show how much the offense was really, really struggling. We just couldn't establish the run, and the passing offense was a complete mess, and there was signal calling was awful. The offensive line play was awful at times, and Jakey bailed us out on this one, definitely. So I can't argue too much.
Well, we'll leave it at Jalen Carter because I feel like it is just the more glamorous of the two. But Jake Elliott has definitely done more than enough. He's more than good. He's sort of sexy. So before we take a break and move on to the Vikings preview, we'll just quickly finish off with the injuries that have come out. And yes, we've had a season, as Liam quite rightly pointed out, being the healthiest we've ever been. And sure as anything, the curse of Liam talking up the fact that injuries will come away. Here they come. So as we briefly touched, Nakobe Dean went down with a foot injury. He's now been placed on IR, so he'll be out for 4 to 5 weeks, which allows us to free up the roster spot, which, as I mentioned, we bring up Rashawn Johnson to replace Morrow, Ellis, was it? Sorry. Up to the...
Yeah, we signed Morrow to the 53, and we've put Rashawn Evans on the practice squad.
Yeah, that was my brain part there. Sorry, everyone. But yeah, so Fletcher Cox had a bit of a hit. He went for an MRI, but hasn't shown anything. Could be available for Thursday night, but that's been touted as very much a discomfort level. So if he doesn't feel like he's in a position to play, or he might aggravate something, he won't play. But I'm sure if he's able to play, he will be right there back trying to keep us going down. Bradbury is in a concussion protocol, unfortunately. So he is going to be out highly likely. I think it's like minimum of 5 days, isn't it? You've got to be on protocol before you can pass the test to be elevated back to healthy. So he's going to be gone, which means that we're going to have to bring in one of the rookie cornerbacks likely to cover him, which I'm not necessarily upset about, but you're going to miss if either Bradbury or Slay goes out. They're going to be a huge loss. So that's going to be an interesting point to watch on Thursday night is who they bring in to cover for Bradbury and how well they do. Lastly, we've got Reed, Blankenship and Gainwell not practicing due to rib injuries. Don't think these are incredibly serious, but I think Reed, Blankenship is seeming like he's lesser than Gainwell, I think was what I read earlier. So I think there's a higher chance of Reed being okay to play Thursday. Gainwell is still considered day-to-day, I think. So there's a chance that we could be out of Gainwell anyway. So the discussions about why he was carrying so much might be a moot point come Thursday night when they have to bring in Swift or Penny. I imagine will be elevated if he's healthy for that game. So we'll be looking at Boston Scott, Penny, and Swift as our running back trio for that game. So it'll be interesting to see. But what's your thoughts, Mick? I mean, it was always going to happen at some point coming in, and Nakobe Dean's going to be a big loss considering the linebacker has been such a topic of discussion.
Yeah.
He had a good game by all accounts, and losing him for 4 or 5 weeks is a problem, especially for him in terms of he's waited so long to get a starting job, and now that's been sort of curtailed for a few games. So touching on Nakobe Dean and the others as well, what's your sort of overall thoughts on the impact and the consequences of those injuries?
Yeah, it's like you said, it's so unfortunate for Nakobe. Like he's trying to get, he's got the starter's job, he's got the green dot on the helmet, he's the signal caller, the general in the defense, and it's just been stripped away from him because he's been placed on IR. And it couldn't be worse actually where these injuries have come up, because we do have depth in a lot of places on this roster. The places we don't have depth, linebacker and safety. Our starting Mike linebacker is on IR. That's a disaster, especially when we consider that Zach Cunningham had a terrible fucking game against the Patriots, and we don't have much behind him. We're signing guys off the street onto the practice squad to try and replace him. We're signing another guy at the 53 who we previously cut because he wasn't good enough to be on the squad. So that tells me everything I need to know about the linebacker position, and that we are in trouble. Especially when it comes to maybe some of the Premier tight ends, TJ Hawkinson, cough, cough, next week. And then again, looking at safety, if Blanket, I don't want to be like clutching at perils. I know it's week 1 and, some of these injuries might not be serious, but losing Reed Blankenship, and I'll stop myself, like a year ago, I'd be like, well, who cares, Just Reed Blankenship, he's a UDFA. Reed is now one of the guys on defense for us, and so we need him to start because, like I said, we just don't have the depth. Beside him, we've got Justin Evans, who's fucking terrible, and then under that, who do we have? Terrell Edmonds, how many snaps did he get? Have you got the snap count in front of you?
I can get it.
So
10.
10 snaps on at safety on Sunday. Bravo. And then after that we've got Sidney Brown, who we all love. We love Shagger Brown. I don't know if we're going to call him that yet, but who made good plays on special teams. Didn't have a snap for the defense on Sunday. So it's another guy going in, possibly green, on a scheme that he's not completely comfortable with or familiar with, being only a rookie and still learning the playbook and learning under Sean Desai's instructions. So it's a massive worry bead for the linebacker position and the safety. Like I said, the injuries just couldn't be in worse positions, really. For me, I mean, it's not as if like you've got a perfect place for you to get an injury. Although maybe punter wouldn't be too bad. But like I said, like the Fletcher Cox one isn't truly concerning, because you're like, right, Fletcher, if you've got a lot of discomfort, that's fine, maybe sit out a week. We've got Jalen Carter, we've got what's his name, the big guy, Jordan Davis. We've got Milton Williams, we've got Street, who I don't know if Street even played on Sunday actually. But we're built on the lines, so we've got plenty of players there to come in when we truly need them, and it just it's just another concern for me. Look, I'm trying not to clutch at the perils and all that sort of thing, but it's all mounting up.
Street played 6 snaps. Just to clarify your point, so not a great deal, but yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, if you're going to have an injury somewhere, linebacker's probably not not the place that we want to be having it due to the uncertainty at the start of the season and the lack of depth in that position. So that's definitely going to be an area for concern and an area of joy for our guest, Andy, who's going to be joining us shortly. But before that, we're going to take a quick break, roll the adverts in a sec, Mick, and then we'll be back in a few.
Celebrate victories, rally through challenges, and bond with fellow fans as you toast with a dram of Loch Lomond single malt whisky. From tailgating gatherings to watch parties at home, Loch Lomond whisky becomes an essential companion, enhancing the moments that make football so extraordinary. It's the perfect accompaniment, from the joy of victory to the bittersweet moments of defeat. Loch Lomond offer a wide range of malts, with their flagship perfectly balanced, and signature expressions Inchmoan and Inchmuren to suit any taste palette. Celebrate greatness on and off the field this season with a perfect balance of Loch Lomond whisky and Eagles football. From the first pour to the crowd roar, fly Eagles fly.
And we're back. And like I said, we've got our friend Andy, Vikings fan, on to join us for the preview of Thursday night football with the Vikings. But first off, Andy, how are you? Thanks for joining us. First off, how are you doing, man? How was the? How did you feel about your overall the Tampa Bay loss? I know it's not probably an easy thing to talk about so soon, but from our perspective, as we were at the wedding, we barely had a chance to catch our own game, so we're relying on you very much to give us your thoughts on the game.
Yeah, no problem. Nice to see you, lads. Haven't spoken for a long time, so very nice to see your beautiful faces on the screen.
Oh, thank you very much.
And congratulations to Liam as well. Obviously not with us, but hope you had a nice time at the wedding. Yeah, it was a really frustrating game, to be honest. Truth be told, I've not paid a lot of attention pre-season. For one reason or another, but I find those games quite difficult to get into. I could tell from a brief overview that we weren't playing any of the starters at all. So it was hard to sort of gauge what to expect from this season, really. I think 13 wins last season, you always think, wow, it would be amazing if we could build on that. But it was just a really annoying game in a lot of ways because we didn't play it particularly badly. But we made life so difficult for ourselves as well. I mean, so many silly mistakes.
So you turned over the ball 3 times. I got down on the notes here. Was that all sort of passing plays, or was there a couple of fumbles in there?
No, I mean there was 3 offensive turnovers. 2 were in the red zone. One was a fumble, and you know what the internet's like. You know what Vikings fans can be like. Straight away, there was people getting on Cousins' back for one of them, but he fired a pass into KJ Osborne, maybe a yard from the end zone, and he just had it ripped out of his hands. The pass was perfect. He just had to find a way in, and to be in those positions and not make those count, it's something we saw quite a lot of last season, and you can't get away with it, even if you're playing a half-decent team. And on the other side, 6 penalties again, which I think equate for about 50 yards. Stupid things like having too many men on the field, just giving up ridiculous yardage. And again, people think what they like about Baker Mayfield, but he's been around, he knows the league, and they're still a capable enough team to punish you for that sort of thing.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield. Oh, sorry, go on, mate.
Oh, I wasn't going to talk about Baker, but you kind of feel like. I was going to say it was interesting that you said, Andy, that you didn't play the starters during the preseason, and that's one of the things that me and Phil were talking about during our own game, because neither did the Eagles, and we were like, is that a contributing factor of how rusty the offense was when they came out, because Jalen hadn't seen any real snaps, the offensive line hadn't seen any real snaps, and it seems to be becoming a theme around the league, and I don't know if maybe they're going to change that. like looking at next preseason, if you're going to start introducing starters and things like that, just to try and combat the rustiness of week one, depending on the matchup that you've got. But just going back to your game, I'm just looking at some of the stats, and it's unbelievable because you look at Kirk Cousins. You see, he had the ball in the air 44 times, and completing 33 of them. That's a 75% completion percentage, 344 yards, and you only put up 17 points.
Yeah,
how is that possible? It just doesn't seem.
I know it's when O'Connell came in, this was what we expected. We expected to throw the ball more. He's a quarterback himself, and he was really happy to work with Cousins. We also moved Cook out the door in the off season, and the running game has been left a bit questionable, really. I mean, we've got Madison there, who's probably deserving of a chance to be the alpha at a team, but in pre-season, one of the things that did stand out was there's no real plan for who the backup is. We tried Ty Chandler, we tried Kenny Wong, who's now injured. Nobody did anything of note, so we ran the ball a lot less. We do have good passing options as well, so there's every reason to be throwing the ball a lot more. But when you throw in 350 yards and putting up 17 points, it's absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, it's like Mick's covered it. That was the point I was kind of going to go on to after briefly speaking about Baker Mayfield. Like we said, he's been in the league and he knows what to do. He can be inconsistent, but I think there was just an expectation that when you're going from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield, that there's going to be a natural steep drop down in talent or reliability. I'd say in terms of, I know there's an obvious deficit in talent, but reliability with Tom Brady, you know exactly what you're getting, and you can pretty much put your mortgage on that every game. With Baker Mayfield, you could easily double your money as to lose everything just as easy, just as flipping a coin. So, it makes sense. I mean, when you've got Jordan Addison, highly touted rookie wide receiver, also getting your receiving touchdown, his first touchdown in the NFL, and obviously the name that does not need to be said on this podcast, Justin Jefferson, is obviously number one wide receiver in the league last season. High chance he's going to be that again if Kirk can maintain the level of supply that he normally does. As you can see, like with 350 yards, it's hard not to see Justin Jefferson sort of smashing records previously struck last season. But the Vikings are turning over the ball, like you said. It's sort of it couldn't be put at Kirk's door, but it's naturally fan base is looking for a scapegoat, and it's always going to be the quarterback. Even if it's a running play, it's always the quarterback, the handoff, or something stupid like that. But Madison, like you said, he deserves a chance. He got the rushing touchdown for you guys as well. So he obviously has managed to sort of justify his position as the alpha. So you're not in a terrible position. And I think the scoreline, I think it's more the shock rather than the performance or the scoreline. People are just, wow, okay, no one expected Tampa Bay to come in and win a game, but they obviously didn't technically win it convincingly. But Baker just had a good game. Next week he could throw 5 picks and lay an absolute egg. So I think you just got on the unlucky side of this one, maybe. But let's turn our attentions now. Let's just put that in the rearview mirror. Look ahead to Thursday night. A really short week, obviously, for both teams. It's not easy going into a short week when there are issues, and there are always going to be issues. But for us, it's sort of a few injuries that are clearly not going to be healed by that time. For the Vikings, as we've discussed, it's just going to be sort of the uncertainty around your running game, whether Kirk's going to be pretty much on point as he can be. It's prime time. We know the theory around prime time Kirk. I'm not always quick to rest my hat on that notion, but it is nice that it sustained itself long enough that it has to be somewhat true in the narrative of games. But we're going to talk about a couple of key matchups that we've highlighted from our point of view, and that is sort of, I'm going to go with the second one first, which is Hockenson against our linebackers. Now, that's probably going to be the key battle from our defensive game point of view. Hockenson just got the recent extension on his contract, obviously stole him from the Lions, and he performed pretty well for you last season. And as was evident against the Patriots, we struggled to contain Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki. That was that seems to be our weak. It seemed to be our weak area last season, over the middle of the park. We stopped the big plays, but that just promoted a big open space for tight ends to maximise that space and dinking and dunking down the pitch. And with a pass like Kirk, you don't need to be invited twice to throw it, to sling it down the field. If the secondary holds up, we're going to have to from our point of view, we're going to have to really sort of focus on how we're going to deal with that. And I just personally, Mick, I don't really see how we're going to do that. That sounds really kind of completely defeatist, but because it's so evident and Hawkinson's an upgrade on what we've just faced, and now we've got an injury to Nagobi Dean, the depth isn't there. It feels like it's going to be a real concern for me. I don't know about you, Mick.
Yeah, absolutely. Hawkinson is going to be a problem for us. Tight ends are always a problem for us, and it was evident again on Sunday. Like you said, having depletion in the linebacker position just compounds the problem, as well as, if you're going to drop a safety into the box, you're leaving yourself up top to the big plays against the two wide receivers. You've got Justin Jefferson. You're probably going to want to try and bracket him with the corner, especially with Bradbury out this week. So if you're looking at a matchup, you're looking at Justin Jefferson versus a Josh Jobe. You're probably going to try and bracket him with one of the safeties, so you can't drop him into the box. Who else are you going to cover? You've got Jordan Addison on the other side. Maybe Slay might be covering him. Okay, what else are you going to do? You've got Hawkinson over the middle. It's just that it's a bit of a matchup nightmare for the personnel that we have available for this game and the experience that we have in the defensive secondary. Talking about guys like Joe, guys like who the fuck knows who's going to start at linebacker, and whoever's going to be paired up with Reed Blankenship. So it's definitely an area for concern. And if I've got Hawkinson in any of my fantasy leagues, I'm probably going to start him.
I think you'd be starting him anyway, to be fair, but I get your point. It's if you could captain, as we do in our fantasy Premier League games, you can captain to get some double points or something. I'd be smashing him into the captain spot, I think, for this week. Andy, thoughts on? I mean, first off, from your perspective, how did Hawkinson do against Tampa Bay? Did he have an okay game? Was he quiet? Was he just not used? And then what's your sort of thoughts against the Eagles sort of linebacker core and your chances?
Yeah, I mean, as you were talking about it, I thought, I feel like he had a quiet game. But then when you look at the numbers, second most receptions, which isn't that unusual for someone of his ability, but I feel like it's sort of maybe we missed a trick even still, because Jefferson started the game like an absolute train. I think he had 100 plus yards after the first two quarters, which
I think you're right.
He was eating up the yards, but then he only finished with 150. So something happened. They made an adjustment. We didn't really respond to it. I mean, he's always going to be in double coverage, but somehow he still seems to get it done. But and maybe with a rookie on the other side, there's work to do there. Osborne's not quite filling anybody with confidence, so Hawkinson has to step up, and he has to be. I just think when it's not working with JJ, Hawkinson is that guy who, like Mick said, he has to make those shorter catches. He has to be in that space between the lines and just make those reliable, 8-10 yard gains down the field, because that's exactly what Tampa did. They didn't do anything expansive to beat us, but they ran the ball quite well, and Baker was just making 8-yard passes. It was just 8 yards, chipping away, moving the chains like that. And sometimes I think with the Vikings, it's a bit all or nothing. Kirk's got a great long ball. He loves to air it out. We saw with the Addison touchdown so many times with Jefferson. But I don't know, sometimes it just feels like we could do the basics a little bit better. And like if you've got those very, very evident injury concerns in that area, then it seems like a matchup that's in our favour, I guess.
Yeah, apologies for covering your face. I wasn't quite sure the graphic was going to overlay, but it's not that I don't like looking at you. It's just it might be a little bit pertinent for a bit of information for us and for you with looking at Hawkinson's 35 yards that he got and the impact that the receiving game had, like you said, Justin Jefferson getting 150 yards and Jordan Addison getting a more than respectable first game, 61 yards and a touchdown. I think in terms of fantasy owners, when you're looking at a rookie wide receiver who's been taken that high into a system where you've got a player like Justin Jefferson already there, people are getting excited because you know that he's going to get a bit more freedom to sort of work his way in, and he's done that now. So a lot of people are going to be elevating him to their starting lineups if they weren't already being gambled on. But yeah, it's like I say, I'm not going to touch too much more on the tight end side of things, but I think it's safe to say that that's a solid area where you guys are going to look. You know, if you know what you do, if your coaches know what you're doing, that's where they're going to be targeting. So, and I'm pretty sure they do. After your record last season.
I think it's something we should be going as well, Phil. Sorry, just to interject, but
yeah.
How many? We're talking about Hawkinson having a quiet game, or sort of Andy said he only had 35 yards ish. How many yards does Dallas Goedert have on Sunday? 0. 0 yards, 1 target, 0 catches, and that is unforgivable, and it better be remedied this Thursday. Sorry, just need to slip that in because I didn't get it in during the game preview. The game recap of the Patriots. And what the fuck are they thinking not getting the ball to Dallas Goedert? Things better change this week.
Personally, I can only put that down to I think the Eagles' game plan was very much engineered towards the situation, which I prayed that they wouldn't do when we were looking ahead toward the Patriots game. It was more of a case of there's a big ceremony going on. Hopefully the Patriots will be too distracted by the ceremony. They won't be up their A game. It turned out that I think it was us that sort of allowed the situation to sort of muddle things up, and the weather and everything else. But we won't go back and tread on too much old ground. It's going to be more of a case of looking ahead and going and hoping that Dallas Goedert definitely, like you said, gets a significant upgrade in targets because he is that reliable guy. And when you're going into a season looking at the receiving core of Smith, Brown, and Goddard, and Goddard doesn't even gets 1 target. It's you just like this. You're just looking at the coach going, "What are you doing, man? Please, like I say, my unofficial role in this podcast is always to look at the reasons why. Like, it's easy to get angry and say Dallas Goedert getting 1 target and is abysmal. But I was kind of go, well, why has that happened? Why are the coaches deciding? What could be the reason why? What happened elsewhere in the game that meant that probably that wasn't where they were going for? And I can't find anything. I can't look at it and go, well, that's what happened. I'm sat here with you, Mick, going, it's unacceptable and it needs to change for this game. And it better do. Next on the matchup list, we've got our interior defensive line versus what Mick has written down. Andy, don't shoot the messenger. He's put a weak Vikings interior. Now, I don't have any knowledge on this situation, but what's your thoughts on your own interior versus our interior?
Helps if I unmute myself. I think I don't know if we were recording when I said this bit, but a lot of it's going to depend on injuries as well. We have picked up some before the game, picked up a couple during the game as well. So, and a short week as well, like you said. So I don't know who's going to make it, to be honest. They're hoping one of the main guys was described as day-to-day. One of them did come back on the field, but heavily strapped up. And then again, it's a short week. So what sort of state are they going to be in if they do make it? I try not to get too swept up in the Twitter side of things, but we have a guy called Ed Ingram, who's becoming a bit of a joke. I don't know how many times what the record is, but there's a stat going around about the sheer number of times he stood on Kirk Cousins' feet and caused a loss of possession or a turnover, which is a ridiculous stat. I mean, once okay, twice is probably too many, but we're talking 3 or 4 times at least since he's come into the side.
I don't think he could possibly have ever been as bad as Jamon Brown, who actually ended up sacking his own quarterback for us about 3 years ago now. Thank God he never set foot back on the pitch, but we kind of get that sentiment a little bit.
Garrett, so one of the big doubts we've got for this game is Garrett Bradbury, our centre, as well. That's going to be a problem. Anyway, I think we'd have a problem in this game even if he was fit. So yeah, it's not an area that anyone at the Vikings is particularly big on. It's been a problem for the last couple of years that is needed to be addressed, but we've had a lot of other problem areas in the squad and you can't address them all at the same time. So it's definitely not an area of the squad that kind of fills many people with confidence.
Well, maybe we'll have a bit of luck in that area, because I feel like going into this Thursday night football, I'm feeling increasingly deflated about it, given the situations, and the more I think about us facing your receiving core. It's sort of, I know we've got our own significant receiving core, but based on how we, you wouldn't have thought we were both going into this. You would have thought, listen to this podcast, that we were both going into it 0-1. No, we still won our first game and we still managed to sort of get through it. So we should be at least positive at that aspect. And it's probably more pressure on you guys, especially going into the link to write a season, because Darren 0-2, it's devastating, because it's sort of you 0-1 is fixable. 0-2 suggests there's a little bit more to get over than just a little bump in the road. But generally, I'm still feeling confident personally. Obviously, you will against your own team. I feel like being at home. If it was in Minnesota, it's probably one of those pick-ems where if we were visiting you, I'd be slightly less confident. Maybe not predicting a significantly positive result, but I feel like based on maybe how last season went, we thought it was going to be a lot closer last season, and we ended up sort of having a really good game, but we've lost a few of those players, and we obviously started off against the Lions scoring a lot of points, so we kind of went into that game confident in our offense, which we're not so much this time. So it says sort of 2 questions for me overriding the game, which is, can we shore things up on defense enough to stop that killer triple threat that you've got, and can we get our offense going, because it sort of spits and starts. Don't get me wrong, we've discussed this already, Andy, but obviously when they were throwing the ball, there was some quality passing, but then it just sort of either the Patriots adjusted and just stumped us a bit, or we were just not able to get any kind of fluidity going. So there's a big question mark over that. And as we touched on the Dallas Goedert situation, that if that was all just a one-off, then we'll be absolutely fine. But if those are sort of systemic problems which are going to take a lot longer to overcome, it could be a really difficult game for us to try and do it. Because from my perspective, probably could well be quite a big shootout, I think, with 2 such stellar offensive receiving cores, good passing, and that, I think. And our defensive situation is going to probably allow a lot of yards to someone like Hockenson, and probably a couple of significant amount of points as well if we're not careful. So the offense is going to have to be on their game for me. Mick, I don't know what your sort of overall thoughts are about in terms of how the game's going to go.
Yeah, I think defensively, to try and negate like some of the premier wide receivers, if you can even try and negate these guys, I mean, we've got to try and win on the line of scrimmage. I think where it went wrong with the Patriots, we started losing on the line of scrimmage, and it really, really hurt us. If we can get that pass rush to put pressure on Kirk Cousins, before these deep routes are developing, they'll probably try and hit us with some shallow routes. Like we said, Hockenson is going to be one of our main problems. Whether or not we can take that away, or Sean Desai may just allow that to happen, just let them take the easy yards in front of the sticks. Death by 1,000 cuts, as we're pretty used to, is the usual sort of Vic Fangio disciple sort of Gannon defense that we're used to. Just let them take the short yardage and just avoid the big plays, leaving 2 high safeties, and that could be the game plan that we're looking at. So, like you said, it might be just death by 1,000 cuts on defense, and just allow the pass rush to get home and try and collapse the pocket, get pressures on the quarterback, and put Kirk off his game. Just try and disrupt as much as possible. Like I said, as Andy said, the right guard seems to be a bit of a calamity. So if we can get Jalen Carter over the top of that guy, or Jordan Davis on the top of that guy, then that's an area where we can win and try and consistently win. Looking at the offense, it's whether or not the offensive line can try and get their shit together before next week is another matter, because correct me, your defensive coordinator, Andy, is Flores. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
He's just come in, and Flores likes the blitz. Yeah. We don't like the blitz. Jalen doesn't like the blitz, and we really struggled with it. I think Jack Stoll was on blitz duty as tight end, and he just let someone completely past him. I think it was Christian Gonzalez, who the Patriots just drafted, and he took Jalen down for an easy sack, straight line, straight for him. The Patriots have Matt Judon, yeah, but Andy, you'll know the Vikings pass rush is quite a force to behold. So you've got Daniil Hunter, who is a guy that will punish. If the option is there, he will punish. He will take no prisoners when it comes to his pass rush ability. And I think I'm struggling to think who.
There's talk that he's going to send Harrison Smith, although from safety we'll be doing a lot of that under Flores as well. We actually did pretty well in that regard. I think it was interesting because we pressured Mayfield quite well last week and put him under a lot of pressure, but they came out and it was almost like they said, "Oh, you're going to blitz? Well, watch this," and they blitzed even more than we did. Thankfully, Kirk got the ball out of the way. So yeah, it was a bit sort of a bit of a strange matchup, but there's a lot of unknown things about the Vikings still at this point. I mean, our run defense was quite good in week one. It's not much to go off one game, but it wasn't very good last season. Our secondary was quite good. That was terrible last season. We got torched time and time again. I know we won 13 games, but we won a lot of them in ridiculous circumstances. We gave up, I think, the second most passing yards last season. So that's an area that hasn't been right for years, and we thought we were addressing it. We drafted in that area. We drafted Lewis Seen 2 years ago. He broke his leg in the UK game last season. It was awful to see that. So he's just coming back. We've added Byron Murphy, which is a great pickup, but the group is still very unsettled and inexperienced in a lot of ways. And you guys have got two absolutely elite wide receivers, and that could be our undoing, definitely. Even if we do a job on the ground, which is a tough job against the Eagles anyway, you can hurt us on both phases, so it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah, I think that just listening to you two talk has sort of allowed me to garner some sort of positivity looking into the game, where some we might have some particular joy. I think, yeah, if you look at the stats from last week, like the rushing offense for the Vikings was pretty low key. Isn't the game plan? The game plan's to throw it, and with three receivers such as you have, I think the key is going to be getting to him before he throws it. So I think if I was the game plan, it'd be a case of, hey, you've got to put everything into to get into the quarterback as quickly as possible. Maybe not some sacks, but to get him off his game, incompletions, and sort of pick up in secondary. So that probably leads, like Nick said earlier, to allowing the short dink and dunking in the middle of the park, because we want to either be throwing it all the way down the field to give our cornerbacks a chance to sort of but to get before he even chances to throw the ball, then yeah, if he's going to get a shot off to Hockenson every now and again, we'll just have to accept that as the collateral damage. But if we can get to him more often than not, put him off his game, that's probably going to be the key to our defensive program, but also the game as a whole. Because if the fewer points we keep you to, the less the pressure there is on the offense, which has clearly not been firing on full cylinders, is going into the game. So from my perspective, I think it's going to be a shootout because I feel like we've got enough deficiencies to be at risk of conceding a few points, maybe a few long touchdowns if Bradbury's replacement isn't up to standard and the death by 1,000 cuts that Mick said with the tight ends. But that being said, if we get to the quarterback early enough, we could keep it low enough. So I'm not going to go into the predictions now because I feel like it's just too soon. We'll do our predictions offline. But Andy, I will come to you briefly. I just want to get your gut feeling. Basically, I won't ask you for a full-on breakdown prediction, but if I was to put a gun to your head right now and say, how do you think the game's going to go, and what do you think it's going to be a rough sort of score, maybe sort of, you don't have to go specifics. What do you think what you're going to be faced with on Thursday night, and how confident are you?
I'd definitely be lying if I said I was confident. I think as Vikings fans, we looked at the fixtures and we thought, I think that there was just an assumption, and I feel probably from a lot of neutrals as well, that we would beat the Bucs. Because people, it's often informed by what you see further down. So people looked at the Bucs and then they saw the Eagles and thought, okay, so we'll win the first one, lose the second one. That's fine. But then you look further down and you think, okay, we've got to go at the Chargers. We've got to play the Chargers. Tough game. Panthers, Jesus, if we can't beat them. And then the Chiefs. So that's straight away, like you touched on it earlier, losing one game, okay, losing two games, you've got a problem. And we could have a big problem after the first four games. I read a stat earlier that in our two most recent prime time visits to your stadium, we've scored one touchdown.
Wow.
In the last two, which was
2000. Keep talking, Andy. This is making me feel good.
2020, 2018. But you said something earlier, Phil, about sort of we didn't play that well, and you certainly didn't play that well. But if it's therefore a case of like early season rustiness, and you've got to take a step back and say, well, we could improve those things. I think it's as simple as if both teams hit their stride, I think you'll win. You're the better team. You're the more contender-ready team. So even if we would have to bring our absolute A game and hope something wasn't right with your guys, I think, to get the win, especially going there, ridiculously hostile place to go. So, I think, not expecting us to go there and win, but definitely just want to see some improvements in those silly things that we let ourselves down with. If we turn up and play well and don't win, then fair enough. But if we shoot ourselves in the foot, it'll be really annoying.
Yeah, I don't think I can disagree with that too much, Mick. I think it feels very much that's kind of what I was trying to say earlier. I think if both teams, if we sort ourselves out, we are the better team and we should win out. It feels very much like if we lose, the reason will be because we just couldn't stop shooting ourselves in the foot in one particular area that's we've already touched on, and your receiving core, your just team as a whole just manages to exploit those. So I think that's all about everything, Mick, in terms of what we've got to discuss tonight. Thank you ever so much, Andy, for jumping on very last minute, because I know we did have plans to get you on, believe me, before tonight. It's just obviously Liam's wedding has sort of curtailed any memory I have of what our plans were in terms of getting a guest on tonight, and then sudden realization yesterday morning after a heavy night of drinking, oh God, it's Thursday night and we're going to have to pod in the next 2 nights, whether we're ready or not. So thanks for jumping on and jumping in last minute for us. So huge appreciation there. Just a reminder before we finish off that we run our predictions game now for you guys, the fans, to add your own guesses for the game. And we had a good little few predictions this week. Not many points scored for obvious reasons, because a lot of people predicting heavy wins, and the first touchdown scorer being a Slay interception meant that no one was predicting that. So it's pretty even. It's pretty open. If you haven't taken part yet, there will be a link going out in the newsletter and in the WhatsApp group regularly to get your entries in. The winners at the end of the season will get a bottle of Loch Lomond whiskey. Eagles, British and Irish Eagles mine, so it could be Kelly Green, it could be Midnight Green version. And a Passing Glove bundle and a T-shirt will also be going to second and third place when we get to the end of the season. So don't miss out on your opportunity to embarrass us as the podcast host, because, you know, we like to think that we know what's going on, but it shows how difficult it is. But you guys might know more than us. So don't forget to get predictions in. The deadline for signing up for the Philly trip to Dallas, to Philadelphia to watch the Dallas game. The closing date for full payment and anyone to sign up is the end of this month. There is still time to get in, but obviously you're not going to have much time to save up the shekels to pay it all off. But it is still open. Once we get to the end of September, we will have more of a confirmed idea of who's going and the itinerary for those that are going. I think that is all I was going to speak about post-pod. There obviously are the watch-alongs. Don't forget to sign up for those either. So we've got the first Commanders game in the start of October. We've got the Niners game in the 3rd of December and the Seahawks game later on in December to get your registration into, because they will book up quickly, and we are your route into getting a place in those watch-alongs. So I think that's it. Unless there's anything from you, Mick, are you happy to cut off?
Yeah, I'm happy. Just I'm blown away with how well you were doing there, Father. I was just like, yep.
I appreciate it, man. Well, that's it, guys. So like I said, short week. So we're playing Vikings on Thursday night. So we'll hopefully have a nice, easy weekend to put our feet up on and enjoy everyone else struggling, and to give Andy some well-deserved jibs. Hopefully that is exactly what's going to happen. I've been your temporary host, Phil, with Mick and Andy for the British and Irish Eagles podcast. And good night. Go Birds.